That way I can answer any and all of your questions. Okay? So be sure you're checking your answers. And what I want to emphasize, what I emphasized in my first block, luckily a lot of y'all attempted the homework and turned it in, so thank you. First block wasn't necessarily the case, and I just asked them, I was like, be honest with me, I said, did you forget, did you not understand? Kind of a mix. But what I just want to re-emphasize is if you're not understanding something, you need to ask questions. Okay, y'all do a okay job with that, asking questions when you're not understanding. But you have to take ownership of your learning, okay? And asking questions to me is a sign of strength because it's showing that you care and that you want the help, okay? It's not a weakness, right? So just remember that if there's stuff that you're not understanding, y'all put your phones away, please. I'm talking to one. Okay? So it's a sign of strength if you, I believe if you ask questions that you're not understanding, okay? So as we go over this homework, if there's something you're not understanding, if there's something during today's lesson you're not understanding, just raise your hand and say, hey, Ms. Barlow, I'm not understanding. Can you repeat that or ask some sort of question, okay? Because at some point you have to take ownership for your learning, okay? I can only do so much. I mean, obviously I'm the one teaching and I want you to understand it, but if you're not asking anything, I'm assuming everything's fine and dandy, okay? So it's really important that you are asking questions if there's something that you're not understanding, okay? All right, so for our 1 through 3, you need to state the missing information, show that the triangles are congruent to each other, okay? Remember, for the state the missing information or determine what additional information, blah, 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 only one thing is missing, okay? If it looks like more than one thing is missing, the other thing is obvious, okay? So for number 1, I want to show that these two triangles are congruent by side angle side. Okay? Remember, with side angle side, the angle must be in between the sides. Okay? So the angle has got to be in between the sides. So notice that for number 1, all I'm given is that these sides are congruent to each other. Right? And for these problems, there's only one thing missing. So because it looks like I'm missing 2 things, one of those has to be obvious. Okay? These angles right here are vertical. Okay? Vertical comes up all the time with these proofs. Vertical angles, reflexive property, midpoint, bisector. All of that comes up over and over and over again, okay? So these angles are vertical, so that's your quote-unquote obvious, okay? So those angles are going to be congruent to each other, which means you need a missing side, okay? And that side has to be so that the angle is in between. And the only option for that would be WV and XV. I can't say UW and ZX because then this angle right here would not be in between the sides, okay? For number 2, I'm going to show these triangles are congruent by side, side, side. Again, I'm only given one side, okay? I only need one thing, which means one of those sides has to be obvious. If I break these triangles apart, QS is with both of them, okay? Which means QS is going to be congruent to itself, which means the only 2 other sides that are going to be congruent to each other are those 2 sides going like this. So QR and QY are going to be congruent to each other, or they need to be congruent to each other. And then for number 3, I need these triangles to be congruent by side, angle side. Okay, so once again, the angle needs to be in between the 2 sides. But notice that if I break these triangles apart, they both have JK. So that's my obvious, is that JK is with both those sides. So JK is going to be congruent to itself. I need an angle that's going to be in between those 2 sides, which would make this one RKJ and IJK. Okay? You can't just say K and J because K would be this entire angle. Okay? I'm not looking at the entire angle. I'm only looking at this top half in blue. Okay? Any questions on 1 through 3? Like I said, please, please, please ask if something's not clicking. Alright. For 4 and 5, you need to list all the congruent parts of the triangle, so that's just simply looking at the names. So remember we talked about on Friday, so for example, F is the first letter, it's going to be congruent to the first letter and the other triangle, which is P. Same thing for G. G is the second letter, it's going to be congruent with the second letter in the other triangle, R. Same thing with the sides. F, G are my first 2 letters, it's congruent with the first 2 letters on the other side, PR. FH first and third letter, PQ first and third letter, those are congruent to each other. And then the same thing for number 5. Any questions on 4 and 5? Okay. Now let's talk about your proofs. All right, for number 6. Prove that the two triangles are congruent, and you're given that D is the midpoint of AB, and you're also given that AC and BC are congruent to each other. All right, so the first thing you need to do is list your givens. Okay, so list your givens, and then figure out the other pieces. All right, so when I'm told that D is the midpoint of AB, remember midpoint means it's cutting the segment in half. So that means the two halves, AD and BD, have to be congruent to each other. Okay? So that's your side, and then you can also say that CD is congruent to itself by the reflexive property. If I break these triangles apart, I have CD with both triangles, so that's congruent to itself by reflexive, and then I've got side, 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 so I can say these triangles are congruent by the SSS. Yes, ma'am.
It don't matter if you probably label undefined mark. Like you put 2 dash, like it doesn't matter where.
As long as you're
Consistent. But I'm talking about
so
it doesn't matter where mark.
no. So as long as, like, if you did one marking here, as long as this one and this one are the only ones with one marking, then yeah. So to me, it was saying she had only one marking here for C, A, and CB, and then she had her 2 markings down here. Is that okay? That's totally fine. Just as long as you're consistent. So I shouldn't have 1 marking here and 2 markings here, because that would be saying that those 2 sides are not congruent to each other. Okay. Good question. Other questions on number 6? All right, for number 7, I'm given that RS and PQ bisect each other. What does bisect mean? Cut in half. Okay, so RS and PQ are cutting each other in half. Okay, so that means the 2 halves, so for example for RS, I have RT and ST, those are going to be congruent to each other. QT and PT are going to be congruent to each other, okay, because of my definition of bisector. Alright, and then you see that I've got 2 lines intersecting, and they're opposite angles. Those are going to be vertical, okay? So you have a side, an angle in the middle, and another side, so that those 2 triangles are congruent by side, angle, side. So remember, for side, angle, side, the angle must be in between the sides. All right? Questions on 7? Oh, being kind of quiet. Yes, Ben.
So do you not have to put, like, that PQ and, or RS and PQ?
I meant to. I meant to. I just forgot. Yeah. Always list your givens. Okay, so that was something I didn't do the best job with on this. Always list your givens, okay? So, yes, you have to. Good question. So, if you cannot do anything else in a proof, you're lost. The least you can do is rewrite your given statement. Okay, because that's the first step in a proof. Rewrite your givens. Okay, I just kind of got a little lazy. Okay, so if you get a proof on your test and you can't do anything else, you're lost. You can write that down, and you'll get a point, which is better than no points. Okay. You have a question, Jake? No? Okay. All right, and then I can't scroll down anymore, unfortunately, but for number 8, notice that, so like for 6 and 7, it says prove triangle, blah, 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 is congruent to triangle, blah, blah, blah. For 8, it's saying prove that these sides are congruent to each other, okay? Anytime you're given something like that, that means you got to use that CP/CTC at the end. Okay, you still have to show that the triangles are congruent, but at the end, you've got to use that CP/CTC, okay? So I was given that sides QP and SP are congruent to each other, and I was also given that angle QPR and SPR are congruent to each other. So those are your given statements. And then I can say that side PR is congruent to itself by the reflexive property. So I've got side, angle, side. Got a side in between. Alright? And then from there, because these triangles are congruent, that means their corresponding parts are congruent. So because the triangles are congruent, then I can say that QR and SR are congruent by your CP/CTC. Okay? Alright, there any questions on the homework? Y'all are being kind of quiet, it's making me nervous. Anything at all? Alright, this will be on Schoology. Okay, if you didn't turn in your homework today, if you turn it in tomorrow, it's only 10% off. After that, it's not credit. Okay? Which is better than no credit, right, Jake?
Sure.
Yes. You were out on Friday, so you get it. Thanks. Is that your question?
No, I was just asking, I'm still gonna have to do it, or
Yes. Yes.
is it back there?
It should have been. Alright, once you're good on this, if you don't have any questions, you may put it away and put that space. Alright, so today we are continuing with our congruence theorems. Alright, so on Friday we talked about 2 of them, and today we're going to talk about the other 3, for 5 total. Alright, so the first one is called angle, side, angle. Okay, so if I have 2 angles and the side in between, remember that's called an included, we talked about that on Friday. If I have 2 sides, or I'm sorry, 2 angles and a side in between, and that's congruent to 2 angles and another side in between, then I can say the 2 triangles are congruent to each other by angle, side, angle. Okay? Let's go through just like we did on Friday and list off the corresponding parts. Okay? So let's just start off with angle M. What angle in the other triangle is congruent to angle M? That's good. Okay? 1 arc. Got 1 arc, so those are congruent to each other. Alright? Now let's look at the side, alright? Be extra careful with how you name it. If I name this first side NN, how do I name the other side? ST, good. Started off with the 1 arc, so I need to start off with the 1 arc over here. And then which angle is congruent to angle N? Angle T, yes, angle T. Okay? So if I name this first triangle, triangle MNL, name the triangle it's congruent to. If I name the first one, it's MNL. Nope.
STR.
There you go, STR. STR. So, gotta start off with the 1 arc, and then the second arc, and then this other one. Alright? So that's angle, side, angle. The side must be in between the angles. Alright? This next one is called angle, angle, side. Okay? So if you have 2 angles and a side not in between the angles, that's congruent to 2 angles and a side not between the angles on the other triangle, then you can say the 2 triangles are congruent by angle, angle, side. So the important thing with angle, angle, side is that the side is not in between the angles. If the side is in between the angles, then it's angle, side, angle. Okay? So once again, let's do the exact same thing we just did. What angle is congruent to angle U? X, good. Let's see, angle V,
Yeah.
Y. And then, let's see, if I name this side as VW, what side is it congruent to? YZ, good. YZ. Alright, so I can say that triangle UVW is congruent to a triangle. Name it for me. The first one is UVW. XYZ, good. Congruent to triangle XYZ. So those 2 triangles are congruent by angle, angle, side. The side is not in between. Alright, the last one that we'll talk about is called hypotenuse leg. Okay? With hypotenuse leg, it must be a right triangle. Hypotenuse leg does not work for any other triangle. It has got to be a right triangle. Okay? Hypotenuse leg must be a right triangle. Alright, and then remember, we talked about this a few weeks ago, remember that the hypotenuse of the right triangle is the side across from the right angle. Okay, so this over here, if you need to make note of it, that's your hypotenuse. Okay, whatever side is across from the right angle, or opposite the right angle, whatever you want to call it. Okay, so for hypotenuse leg, if the hypotenuse and one leg of a right triangle are congruent to the hypotenuse and leg of another right triangle, then I could say that the triangles are congruent by hypotenuse leg. Okay, so once again, one more time, let's go through this. Which side is congruent to side ML? PR, good. And let's see, MN is congruent to PQ. And that's all you need for hypotenuse leg, okay? So, a leg, so any side of the triangle that's not the hypotenuse, and a hypotenuse, okay? As long as they're the same for both triangles, I can say that they're congruent by hypotenuse leg. So, MLN is congruent to PRQ by hypotenuse leg. All right. Okay, go. All right, notice, I'm not going to spell it out for you. You should be able to figure it out. Notice that there's no such thing as angle side side. Think about what that would stand for. Angle side side. Okay. The letters. What is angle side? Okay. That's not a thing. So don't put that on your test. Okay, that's not a thing. So just keep that in mind. And then Delta Math also likes to trick you, like they'll tell you that angle is a thing. It's not. Okay? It's not up there. It's not one of the five we talked about. So just keep that in mind. Angle side is not a thing. Angle is not a thing. So do not put angle side on your test. It's not even good. If I see that, I'm just going to mark it wrong. Okay. So don't try to be funny. That's not a thing. Okay? Just anyway, let's move on. Alright, so I need to determine if these triangles are congruent by angle side, hypotenuse leg, or none of them. Alright, so number one, angle side, hypotenuse leg, or neither?
Angle side.
Angle side, good. Okay, I've got two angles and a side not in between them. Okay, so because that side is not in between the angles, it is angle side.
Can you have a pink folder to finger then?
I do.
That's kind of brown, so to give just when I wrote a pink folder.
Yeah. Thank you. Alright, angle side. Alright, number two. Angle side, hypotenuse leg, or none?
None.
Do we see why none? Okay, that first one is angle side angle. But remember, the triangles have to match. Okay, so this one right here is angle side, because that side's not in between. But the triangles have to match, and if they don't match, then your answer's none. So that one's none. Alright. What about number three? Also none. Good. Also none. Okay? They've got to match. This one's angle side angle. This one's angle side. So that one is also none. Very good. Alright. What about number four? Hypotenuse leg. Good. Okay? This leg is congruent to itself, right? It's the same leg for both triangles, and then these are your hypotenuse. Okay? So I've got a hypotenuse and a leg. It's congruent by hypotenuse leg. Very good. So number four is HL. And then what's number five?
Angle side angle.
Angle side angle. Very good. Okay, the side is in between the angles. Do we understand that? What that looks like? The side being in between the angles? Or the angle being in between the side for side angle side? Yes, no, maybe? Okay. My first thought was having a really hard time with that. So I just want to make sure that we're clear on what that means. Alright, so number five is angle side angle. Alright. For these next four, determine what additional information is needed, blah, blah, blah. Anytime you have a problem like this, you are only missing one thing. Okay? If it looks like you're missing more than one thing, one of those has to be obvious. Okay? One of those has got to be obvious. Okay? So number 6. I want to show that these two triangles are congruent by angle, side, angle. Alright, I've only got one angle. Okay, obviously I need another side and another angle, so something's got to be obvious here. Repeated?
Congruent side is TU.
There you go. Okay, TU is the same side for both triangles. So if I break these triangles apart, side TU is with both of them. Okay, if you need to break the triangles apart and draw it out, do it. Do whatever works for you. I don't care. As long as it works. Okay? So if you need to break these triangles apart, label them, you see that TU is involved with both of them. So that's your obvious. Okay? Now I need a side. So since it's angle, side, angle, I need an angle that's in between that side. Name the angles.
VTU and TUM.
Good, good. Okay. To me, I'm glad you said that, though. You can't just say T and U. Okay? And the reason for that is because this entire thing is T, this entire thing is U. Okay? So you cannot say that. Okay? Brooke, tell me what you said.
VTU and TUM.
Perfect. VTU, which is right there. So you need angle VTU. And what was the other?
TUM.
I think it's, yeah, MUT. MUT. Almost. MUT. Angle MUT. There you go. Okay, so you can't just say angle T and angle U because angle T and angle U are that entire angle. Okay, does that make sense? Okay. That's a very, very common mistake. Which is why I'm glad you said it. Alright, yes. So now I have an angle, a side in between, and another angle. So I can say those are congruent by angle, side, angle. Alright? Number 7. Alright? I want to show these triangles are congruent by angle, angle, side. I've got an angle and a side, which means I need another set of angles. Which angles? Where'd you put me? I didn't say anything. And okay. With here, since things aren't connected, we can just name it with one letter. So name it with one letter for me. There you go. Okay. J and C. Alright, there's actually 2 answers to this one. What's the other set of angles that work? IN? Yep, IN. But it's important that you have that or, okay? Both of them at the same time don't work. So it's either J and T or I and U. And the reason for that is because you just need the angle to not be in between the sides. So as long as my 2 angles are not in between that side, choose whatever pair of angles you want. As long as they're, in the same place, obviously. Alright, so that one's kind of a special case where you could have more than one answer. Alright. Number 8. Show that these triangles are congruent by angle, angle, side. Okay, I have an angle, which means something's obvious here. I need the other angle, which means the side's obvious, right? Okay, what's the side? What sides are obvious?
Side A.
Okay, let me ask you this. Is there a side of...
KO.
There you go, KO. Good, good, good. Okay? That side's involved with both of them. Alright, so that's your obvious. Now I need an angle, okay? The angle cannot be in between the sides. So what angles does that leave?
Okay.
Yes, and? Yes. Okay, so here, Tamia, because it's not getting cut in half, I can just say A and J. Okay? You only have to do the 3 unless it's harder to tell. Okay, so here, A and J are A and J. There's nothing cutting them in half or anything like that. So, A and J, now you see I have an angle, and a side, not in between the angles. Okay, so angle A and angle J. And then for number 9, I want these two triangles to be congruent by hypotenuse split. And I've got no markings. Name them.
QR.
Okay, is that an obvious or yes? Okay, QR is an obvious. Good. It's the same for both. Okay. Is that my hypotenuse or a leg? A leg. So now I need my hypotenuse. Okay. XR and careful how you name it. There you go. XR and PQ. So those are your two hypotenuses that you need in order for this to be congruent. So QR is congruent to itself. That's your obvious. Okay. Alright, before you flip back to the back, look at the front real quick. Make sure you don't have any questions. Fine. Because that is not a hypotenuse. Okay, that's a leg. So, QR, you see that it's the same for both triangles? Okay, so that's your obvious, and that's a leg. So that means now you need a hypotenuse, which would have to be whatever is across from the right angle, which is QP and RX. Okay, you can't use another leg. It's got to be one leg, one hypotenuse. Okay. Other questions? Anything at all? Alright, look to the back. Alright, remember with your proofs, have your phones away, and have your eyes up here. Try not to fall asleep under this form. Trust me, I get it, it's boring. But ask questions if you're confused. If I'm going too fast, ask me to slow down. Anything I can do to help you. Okay, because I understand that this stuff is a little overwhelming. Okay? Alright, number 1. Prove that these two triangles are congruent. I'm given that PR is the angle bisector of QPS and QRS. Okay, we haven't talked about what an angle bisector is, but we can use context clues, I think. I think we're smart to do that. What does bisect mean? Cut in half. Okay, bisect means cut in half. Okay, so if it's an angle bisector, it's cutting an angle in half, right? Okay. So, this PR is cutting angle QPS in half. Okay? So that must mean, that those have to be congruent to each other, right? Because that PR is cutting angle QPS in half, which means the two halves have to be congruent in order to equal the whole. Just like we talked about with perpendicular bisectors. Okay? The same thing is true for angle QRS. It says PR is the angle bisector of QPS and QRS. So that must mean that those halves are congruent. Okay? Alright, now that we talked about what an angle bisector means, what is the very first step in a proof? State your givens. State your givens. So PR is the angle bisector of UPS and QRS. How do I know that? Let's get do what?
I'll make a comment. Okay.
Oh, no, you're good. So I was given that. That's my quote-unquote reason. Alright. So, now I can say, I know these two angles are congruent to each other, so I can say angle QPS. How would I name this angle right here? If I named the first one QPS. If this one is QPS, how do I name this one? What'd you say then?
I don't know. I said SPR, I think I'm...
Yes, that's correct. I thought I heard a Q. Yeah. So if this one is QPS, or, no, that's why y'all confused. Sorry. QPR. So if this one is QPR, this one is SPR. Do we see that now? Okay. So this one is SPR. And we can say definition of angle bisector. And we can say the exact same thing for, we can say the same thing for the set of angles too, right? Because PR is cutting that angle in half. So we can say that if I name this one as QRP, nope, gosh. QRP, how do I name this one? That's okay, good. And we could say the same thing as above. Definition of angle bisector. Alright, so I've got two angles. Now I need a side, because angle is not a thing. PR. Okay? PR is congruent to itself. What's your reason when anything's congruent to itself? Reflexive property. Good. So PR is the same for both triangles. Okay, both triangles include PR. Alright, so PR is congruent to itself by reflexive. Alright, am I done now? Or almost? Have I talked about an angle, and a side? Do what? You good? Okay. So now, I talked about an angle, a side, or an angle, a side, and an angle, whatever. So I can finally say that RPQ is congruent. That's weird. To RPS by this. Let me ask you: is this angle side angle or angle side?
Angle side angle.
Not side angle. Not doing this. Angle side angle or angle side?
Angle side angle.
Angle side angle. I've got an angle, a side in between, and an angle. Okay, so that is angle side angle. Okay. Question number one. Like I said, if there's something you're not understanding, I'm going too fast, something that's just not clicking, you've got to ask. And otherwise, if you're not asking questions, I think we're fine. Okay. Alright. Number 2. Prove that these two triangles are congruent. I'm given that V and U are congruent to each other. So go ahead and start marking your picture, okay? So V and U are congruent to each other. So I'll go ahead and write that down. V is congruent to U. Given. I'm also given that EF is, remember the upside down T means perpendicular? That's also given. Alright. let's talk about that second statement. EF is perpendicular to BU. What is that telling you? Not necessarily, okay? I would, if it were cutting it in half, I would have to be told it's a perpendicular bisector. I'm just being told these two segments are congruent to each other, or not congruent, perpendicular to each other. What is it? I thought I just started. There you go, right angle. Okay, they intersect, remember perpendicular lines intersect at a 90-degree angle. Okay, so that means that this right here has to be 90 degrees. Okay, perpendicular lines intersect at a 90-degree angle. Alright, so I can say that angle, if I name this one EFB, how do I name the other one? EFU. They're congruent to each other, and we can just say definition of perpendicular, if that works. Alright, so I've got two angles. That means now I need a side.
Yeah.
EF. Okay, what do you know about EF?
Yeah, it's like the same.
The same for both triangles, right? So what's your reasoning for them being congruent?
Reflexive property.
Very good. Okay, EF is the same for both triangles. So if I take these triangles and split them apart, they both have side EF in common. Okay, so EF is congruent. EF is congruent to itself by reflexive. Okay. So, are these triangles congruent by angle side angle or angle angle side? Angle angle side, good. Okay? It's angle angle side because if you look at that side, EF, it's not in between the two angles. Okay? So I can say that triangle EBF and EUF are congruent by angle angle side. Alright. Before we move on to number 3, are there any questions at all on number 3? Read over it for just a second. Make sure there's nothing you don't understand. Number 3. Alright. Number 3, I'm asked to prove that side AX is congruent to side CX. Okay? Notice in the other two problems, I have proved the triangles are congruent. Prove the triangles are congruent. Here I have proved two sides are congruent. Okay? When you have that, that's when you need to use that CP/CTC. Okay? So you're going to use that at the end. We're still going to show these triangles are congruent because we can't say CP/CTC until we do so. But anytime you're given a problem and it's not asking you specifically to prove the triangles are congruent, you got to use that CP/CTC at the end. The corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. All right. I am given that angles A and C are congruent. And I am also given that BX is congruent to DX. So like I said, if you can't do anything else, you can write out your givens. Alright, remember the goal goal-ish, is still to show that these triangles are congruent, okay? We have to do that in order to show CPC. Alright, so I've got an angle on the side. What else can I get?
C and the other two. Oh no, X. I mean X. I'm so sorry. Because it's vertical.
Good, vertical, okay? I've got intersecting lines and opposite angles, okay? So those angles are going to be congruent to each other. Very good. Okay, so if I name this first one CXB, how do I name the second one? AXD. So those are congruent because they're vertical. So are these triangles congruent by angle side angle or angle angle side? Angle angle side, very good. Okay, that side is not in between the angles. All right, so this one, I would say that triangle AXD is congruent to triangle CXB by angle angle side. Okay, from here, now I can use my Sp22. And remember what that means. Corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. So now that I've shown that the triangles are congruent, I can show that all the corresponding parts are congruent. So are AX and CX essentially in the same position on both triangles? Yes? Just need a little more confidence in that. Yes. Okay, yes. So I can simply now just say that because they're in corresponding positions and the triangles are congruent, they're congruent by Sp22. And now I'm done. All right. We'll go to number 3. 2 more problems. So anytime you see prove, but it doesn't say prove the triangles are congruent, Sp22 every time. Alright. Good deal. 2 more problems. Alright, number 4. Prove that these 2 triangles are congruent. I'm given that AD bisects angle A. What does bisect mean?
Cut it in half.
Cut in half. So this line AD is bisecting angle A. So it's cutting angle A in half, which means the 2 halves of angle A have to be congruent to each other. Okay? Those 2 parts must be congruent to each other. Alright, write out your givens. AD bisects angle A. Alright, we just said that these 2 angles were congruent to each other, so let's go ahead and just write that out. If I name the first angle, angle CAD, how do I name the second angle? BAD. Okay, and I can just say by definition of bisector, because it's cutting the angle in half. Alright, what else can I say?
Angle ACB is congruent to angle ABC, definition of perpendicular. The perpendicular line because the other angle is 90 degrees.
That works. Yeah, that works. Okay, so Aiden said that angle ADB is congruent to angle ADC. So this is also going to be a 90-degree angle. Okay, Aiden used, because it intersects at a 90-degree angle, it's got to be perpendicular. That works. You could also say what? Okay, we're not specifically told that it's a perpendicular bisector. We can't say that.
Supplementary.
There you go, supplementary. Okay, this is a line, so 180 degrees. Okay, so either one you use is fine. Alright, I'm going to use supplementary. That's what came to my mind first, but either one works. Alright, what else? I've got two angles, that means I need a side somewhere. Maggie? You had your hand up. No?
C,
What?
D,
CB? How do you know that? Never mind. Aiden?
A, B, congruent to A, B because of the reflective property.
Good, okay. If I take these triangles apart, they both have AD. Do we see that? Okay, so that's going to be congruent to itself by reflexive. Okay. That's reflexive. So are these triangles congruent by angle side angle or angle angle side?
Angle, side angle.
Right angle.
Angle side angle. Very good. That side is in between. So I can say that triangle ADB is congruent to triangle ADC by angle side angle. Okay, so this is a really good example to where just because you have a right triangle does not mean it's hypotenuse leg. Okay, so don't get that in your head. Alright? I don't know anything about the hypotenuse. So I can't say, oh, it's a right triangle, it's got to be hypotenuse leg. Not necessarily. Alright? Lastly, let's do number 5. Alright, prove that these triangles are congruent. I'm given that PQ is congruent to PS, so go ahead and mark that. And then I'm also given that PR is perpendicular to QS, which in turn gives us those right angles. Okay, so PQ is congruent to PS, given PR is perpendicular to QS, given. Alright, Aiden, what you got?
You know that PR is congruent to PR because of the reflexive property.
Good. Okay. PR is involved with both triangles, so that's going to be congruent to itself. Good. PR is congruent to PR. Reflexive. Aiden.
That angle PRS and angle PRQ are congruent to each other because the definition is perpendicular.
Good. So I know that those are right angles because it's perpendicular. Good. So PRQ, yes, PRQ is congruent to PRS by definition of perpendicular. But let me ask you this. Do I need that on my proof?
Start a label.
Well, okay. You need it because it's labeled in there. Yes, it's technically a given. But in terms of how these triangles are congruent. How are these triangles congruent? Hypotenuse leg. Okay, I've got a leg and a hypotenuse. And this is a right triangle. So the question I was trying to get at is, do I need to know anything about an angle besides that it's a right angle for hypotenuse leg? No. I just need to make sure that it's a right triangle. Okay. So lastly, I can say that PQR is congruent to PSR by, come on, just look. That's it. Okay, before you start your homework, I felt like we kind of went through that a little fast. And I felt like, I don't really know where y'all are at, honestly. Y'all are being really quiet, which I mean, I appreciate, but at the same time, it just has no more concern. So I want you to, before you put it away, I want you to, finish timing, I want you to take 1 minute and just look in there and make sure everything makes sense. Okay. And then I'll take any questions. All right, this is not time for you to chat unless you're chatting with each other about the lesson. All right. So 1 minute, starting now, look over anything in the notes before you start your homework. Yes, Natalie.
It probably only doesn't make sense to me because I don't know anything from the list.
Probably not. I would get that lesson watched from again. Yes.
Yeah. I'll do the record today.
Yes, yes. Maybe. In just a second, we'll vote. All right, anything at all? Any questions? Okay, let me show you something on your Delta Math real quick. Tonight's homework is back on Delta Math. Okay, you don't need scratch. All right, you don't need scratch, but it has some basic proofs in there, and I just want to show you how it looks, because it is a little overwhelming to look at. Let's see. Alright, so the first thing it's going to ask you, determine if the two triangles are congruent. Okay, so using one of these 5 theorems we've talked about, can you say these triangles are congruent?
Yes. Yes.
By what? Angle, side, angle. Okay? So if you think they're congruent, then it's going to give you this proof. Okay? And the good thing is all your reasons are given because everything's marked for you. You just have to go put in all the stuff. Okay? So if I want to talk about an angle, I'm going to click the angle button. And which angle is congruent to angle A? M. Okay? If I want to talk about the side, I'll click the side button. AZ is congruent to what side? MN. And then the angle again. What angle is congruent to angle Z? N. And then how are these triangles congruent? Angle, side, angle. So you'll click angle, side, angle. And it'll check you off. Okay? So looks a little overwhelming at first, but I promise it's not that bad. Okay? Alright, tomorrow I think what we're going to do is just have like a little bit of like a practice day. Okay? Is there anyone not going to be here tomorrow? Perfect. Okay, so tomorrow... Okay. Alright, so tomorrow is just going to be a practice day, so you're not missing like a new lesson or anything. Alright, so we'll practice, and then I think what will happen, I'll let you know for sure tomorrow, but I think what will happen is Wednesday we'll review, Thursday we'll test. Because, is there anyone not going to be here Friday? Okay, we'll see what happens. But my plan is to test Thursday. Because I had another lesson to do, but just how I think we're progressing, I think it may be best to just skip it and just practice, and then we'll review Wednesday, test Thursday. Yes.
There's a possibility I might not be here Wednesday.
Okay.
We have a parade the night before. And I'm
Right.
Be away.
Yeah. I'll just make sure, I'm going to stay after school today, so work. I'll make sure to give y'all the review tomorrow. Okay. And if you need to, you can test Friday. I really don't want anyone not testing and then not taking this test until after Mardi Gras. Because let's just face it, you're going to forget everything, you're going to not do great, right? Yeah. So, I really want y'all to, if you don't take this test Thursday, really take it Friday before the break. Okay? Shut up, yes. Yes. so Mardi Gras break is the 28th, and then March 1st and 2nd. So the 3rd and 4th, the Thursday, Friday, you do have school. And so it's only a 3-day break. Yeah, I know. Yes. Yeah, it's only a 3-day break. So 28th, 1st, 2nd, and then you have school the 3rd.
That's not fair.
It used to be 1 week.
It used to be a week, yes. Your guess is as good as mine.
So we only come back for 2 days and get out.
Yes, yes.
Wait, are we gonna do anything in those 2 days? Like tonight? Or can we?
We're gonna learn, but I'm gonna keep it light. They'll be pretty easy. Okay.
Well, I don't know what your version of English is. You have to come back.
I promise you.
I want to say.
Like, I think we did Pythagorean theorem a while ago. We'll do that again, and then we'll do one other thing tied with that I promise you is really easy.
Is it adding a subtraction?
No, no. But it's not,
Do we have to
yeah, but it'll be really easy. Yes, I.
I'm confused by this. They're not related in any way, but there's like legal change.
Yeah, they are. Oh, wait. No, they're not. Okay, but there is an answer choice. So you would say that, and then you would say, that's not one of your 5, so they're not in your own. That's it. Yes, Jake.
So do we have to show up this 2 days?
I mean,